Welcome to the Tuesday Review. I'm Nathan, joined by Alum and Julian for this special bonus episode. How you going, boys?
All right, thank you for having me.
I'm good.
Yes, we're not doing this in the studio. This is a bonus episode we're doing from home, testing some new equipment as we do so. To record this extra bonus episode, we recently had our 200th episode. I guess this will just be like a little bonus for the listeners because no one listened to our 200th episode. I don't know if you saw Alan.
It turns out, a grown man playing a little board game inside a radio station wasn't the most riveting content, but
Wait, hold on. What do you mean nobody watched it?
So normally our videos on YouTube have been getting, I don't know, anywhere from like 30 to 50 views on average, right?
Yeah.
And like last time I checked, our 200 episode had like 7 views,
We have 10 at the
which
moment.
which gave me a giggle. But that episode was for us.
Yeah.
Right? We're not apologizing. Anyway, this is an episode we've been wanting to do for a little while. We all watched Quiet on Set, and we thought we wanted to talk about it, but we never found the time. With Julian obviously being, the other side of the state from us, it's a little bit hard to kind of navigate availabilities and everyone else. Everyone's busy. But we thought we got around to it eventually, and here we are. I guess we'll just start with letting listeners know that this is a confronting show. So it's, I guess, we'll be talking about things like, sexual abuse, bullying in the workplace, all kinds of look show up if you like. It's not an easygoing show. But just be warned, it's not a comfortable show, not a comfortable conversation.
And if you do find some of these things difficult, you can reach helpline in Australia on 13 11 14, and if you're in the US, it's 988, and get some help there. So again, just a content warning for viewers. But if you are interested in the show and you've seen it and you want to hear a bit more of a discussion, stick around.
Look, I guess we'll start, right back at the beginning. When we were children, Nickelodeon was kind of like peak TV.
It was.
Yep.
I was never our house was a Cartoon Network house, so I never watched Nickelodeon. Never really.
Mr. Rich Man over here with his Foxtel.
That's it. Hey, it wasn't Foxtel at the time. What was it? What was it before Foxtel?
Sky? No, that was in New
No,
Zealand.
what was it called? My mum had
what was it called?
Ozstars up here.
Yeah. It was Oz something. Yeah, it was something like that.
See, for the viewers, there's some rich man discussion going on with the pay TV services.
As a child, I never had Foxtel. Okay, so a lot of the shows that were talked about in the show, I never really grew up with. Maybe in looking back on it in hindsight, maybe going back and watching stuff, I know the shows, but I think they were talking about like all that, didn't really have any access to it. It was more the Drake and Josh, and as we got into the later 2000s, that's where I started coming to Nickelodeon. So a lot of the actors I didn't know from the Quiet on Set, but anyway, we'll get into it. So.
Again, for a little context, I guess the prevalence of a cable TV service and stuff for people in the States is a lot more, and was a lot more, considering these days everyone's on subscription services. But in Australia, I think the prevalence was relatively low. So most people in Australia would have their free-to-air TV, so you'd actually have a number of channels. I think there was about, 5 or 6?
Yeah.
These days there's a lot more. So we didn't get as much exposure to Nickelodeon if you didn't have some kind of cable TV service. What we did get was a lot of the public broadcasting services, like ABC would run a few Nickelodeon shows.
Yeah,
but it was mainly the cartoons, because I remember Avatar: The Last Airbender. I'm pretty sure that's part of Nickelodeon, isn't it?
Yes.
That'd be syndicated through the ABC, which is our public broadcaster. So I think I'm in a similar boat where I watch a lot of the Nickelodeon cartoons, but not a lot of the live action shows, at least not till later on.
Yeah, so I mean, the show blew up when it came out earlier this year because for a lot of people who grew up watching these shows, it's kind of like it's world shattering. You know what I mean? It's mind shattering. You can't rewatch these shows and look at it the same way now. Like all of you kind of, people our age, these were shows that you grew up watching. And like I didn't watch Nickelodeon or whatever, but I'd heard of Drake and Josh. I'd heard of all of these different shows. I was aware of them, and like they were that big for me to be aware of them without ever really having consumed them myself.
Yeah.
Like they're not in my area of interest as an adult, but I'm still aware of them through just popular culture. And the show kind of centers on a man called Dan Schneider, who is the brainchild and kind of like showrunner for a lot of these. He's the common thread through a lot of these shows. He's the showrunner. He's in charge of making these shows, and he's a lot of the time he's one of the lead writers. He decides what's a kind of, I guess, good for the production and what's not good for the production, and he has the final say in a lot of how the shows are created. And it's kind of, I guess, about his alleged
His conduct.
inappropriate workplace conduct, right? And there's other kinds of things we'll get into later with more sexual abuse and child molestation and all that kind of stuff. But for most of it, it starts with him and kind of just his inappropriate workplace kind of bullying. I guess you could call him a workplace bully.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, this just seems like a man who never grew up, and he had some like what he thought was funny, like not everyone else thought was funny. But then obviously the thing that gets me the most was how he treated his adult co-workers was definitely more we'll say sexual harassment-y than anything else he did. With the kids, it's like the weird jokes. I mean, that's just a man-child. Like, I didn't.
I'm not even convinced it's man-child. I think if you're an adult and you're in charge of kids and you're a man-child, you shouldn't be in that position, right? You should be old enough, mature enough to separate your ridiculous man-child behaviors and ensure that those kids on set are well looked after, and you're not putting your man-child behaviors in shows that involve kids, let alone like even adults. Like the kids don't understand
Yeah.
what's happening.
No.
So I wouldn't separate their abuse the abuse that he gave to the adults to the children. They're just as bad
Yeah.
because the kids don't understand what he's making them do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I think I side with Julian on that. Like, you need to be extra careful putting children in any kind of, I guess, environment where they're going to be, I guess, broadcast to millions of people.
Yeah.
And children, they're classified as a vulnerable person. There needs to be such an extra level of care. And if that's not, I guess, taking place, and he is, the showrunner, it's ultimately, the buck stops with him. The responsibility is with him. And if he's the one actually instigating some of these things, it's even worse.
Yeah.
Like, obviously they show you clips from the shows, and this is like all the kinds of the feet fetish kind of element of his humor, and the kind of the slime shots and all kinds of just things that are almost just barely what's the
Acceptable.
word I'm looking
Is that what
for?
you're looking
Not
for?
acceptable, but they're like hidden. It's like barely hidden from
Yeah.
what the
Yeah.
actual joke is for
The
the
poorly
adults.
disguised fetish, as they like to say.
Yeah. So I'm like, there's a lot of that. It's just really creepy. And
Yeah.
the kids don't know what's going on, but the adults do. And I'm like, that's the kind of situation where someone needed to pull him aside at the beginning and be like, mate, this is not okay. Like, what are you doing? But it's one of those things where he had that reputation where it's like, oh no, I know what the kids like. I know what I know the kids' humor. You leave it to me. And unfortunately, I guess the network decided he was right because all his shows were hits, so they just left him alone. And there was almost no oversight because he was the hit maker for a network desperate for hits.
So this,
And I'm like,
sorry, Nathan, you go. Sorry.
no, you go on.
I was going to say, like this, like obviously, unfortunately, in the world, everything's about money, right? So there's so much oversight by the higher ups because he's making the money, and it's extremely unfortunate. That's the world that we live in. That they're more than willing
Yeah,
to sacrifice children or people in general,
yeah,
but especially children, to make a quick buck.
yeah. Like, there's no way that they didn't know about his behavior, but they turned a blind eye because, as you said, they're making $1.
Yeah,
It's like, they were making money hand over fist. They didn't give a shit.
yeah,
It is what it is. Like, and as you said, it's disgusting. It's like, but that's the world we live in. And you know what? Hollywood's always been that way, but there are kids involved,
yeah,
and that's where the line needs to be extra firm. There are kids involved. It's not okay. Like, it's never been okay. It's not okay to do anything like that towards anyone. We live in a world now with, I would argue, a little bit more protection. But again, 20, 30 years ago, there was no protection. And they just let it happen because they were making tons of money.
yeah,
And no one wanted to tell this guy no. And that kind of, it's that negative reinforcement That is like you get away with it once and nobody says anything, then you feel empowered to do it again,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
escalates.
And I guess the same thing of like, since he was the top person, in these shows, like who do you complain to if you got to complain about the boss? Like you can't. You can go higher up, but that it doesn't really work because your maximum exposure will be usually to Dan Schneider.
Mm.
Exactly.
You're just stuck in that weird situation of like, you want to go get help from the bullies, but like the responsible adult is the bully.
Well,
Yeah.
so I think they touched on it just barely in the show about how there were regulations for children on set, but they weren't strictly followed.
There
And
was always, they say there was always parents on set, but they always got led into a green room or somewhere else while the kids were like performing and recording. And I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah,
that's a
yeah,
red flag.
yeah. Like I can't understand how. Okay, it's very easy for me to say this because maybe I'm not in that situation, right? But I would imagine as a parent, if I was in an industry like this that is known to be very cutthroat, very um, damaging to people, I don't think I'd let my child out of sight.
There was, well, we'll get to him later, but Drake Bell's dad was on it immediately. And that's what happened, right? He's like, it's like, this is not right. I
Yeah.
don't want this happening. And, the people involved in the shows, they twisted it and they manipulated into basically getting Drake Bell's dad cut off out of his life.
Mm.
Yeah.
So it's a case of like, no, there are parents that knew what was going on, but they got ostracized and they got kind of othered into being like the bad guy because
Yeah.
you're going to put everything at jeopardy. You're putting the show at risk.
Yeah, and I think that happened because in Drake Bell's case, he was quite the star, and they still needed him. Whereas with other actors, it seemed like if you or your parents stood up for something,
Yeah.
your contract wouldn't be renewed.
Yep.
And in a lot of these cases, um, if the child is becoming a child star, a lot of times they end up becoming kind of the breadwinner for the family, which I think we can argue whether or not that's correct. Um, but it kind of happens especially if the parents are supporting the child in their acting, and the child's, I guess, going to studios to record and stuff. The parents are taking them there; they're there, so they can't be at a job at the same time.
Trying to
So
look up the one of the kids on the show, or adults now. We're looking back on the show. I'm trying to find their name, but I'm having some internet problems. He was the breadwinner, as you were about to say,
yeah,
and his mum didn't like the behavior going on, and it strained their relationship. But she made him quit the show, and they moved back to New York, I believe.
I think he ended up not getting a renewal.
Yeah, New York.
Yeah,
But
they didn't offer it to him, and that kind
They're
of
going all that.
yeah,
actually no,
and
there might have been two of them. Sorry.
they attributed, if the same person I think we're talking about, they attributed to the mother being disruptive, right? Kind of like,
Yep.
oh, you're giving us a hard time, you're not doing what we tell you, and then it's sort of you're not getting renewed. There's that pressure, like in this case, this boy is he had his dream job and he was going to get his family out of poverty. And this was their way out of poverty. So you've got that stress too of like you're a child, but you're the breadwinner, as Alan said.
I think this
You're
is Brian Hearn
Yeah, that's what I
yes,
thought.
probably.
and his mum Tracy Brown.
Yeah, and he's tasked with being the breadwinner, being the adult in the family, and making the money, and pulling his family up out of the ghetto and poverty and everything else. And that's like terrible burden for a child. And it's like it's a problem with all of Hollywood, kind of turning a blind eye because you don't want to sacrifice your reputation or your position in uh, an industry built on essentially relationships and who you know, right? And like you're putting all of that on a child itself is morally wrong, and that's another kind of conversation
I agree.
that people need to be having. Like you can't put kids in these situations regardless of misconduct or not. Like
Yeah.
then they need to be able to be a child
Mm-hmm. Well, that's
first.
like the regulations need to be. Yeah, I mean, like, sure, adults, right? They're gonna have regulations. People are gonna break the regulations. That's the way it is, right? Unfortunately, that's the world, right? But if you're dealing with kids and you make a point of having regulations and enforcing the regulations, and if they're broken, there are consequences for it. Like, eventually, the world's going to learn, whatever industry it's in, they're going to learn that there's no breaking the rules. If they need to have a 5 minute break every 20 minutes, they're going to have that 5 minute break every 20 minutes, whatever it is. If they're going to have to go to school for 4 hours a day, they're not mucking around. They're going to go to school for 4 hours a day. And if it's broken, bam, then maybe they should have somebody from a union that is present on every single set, ensuring that all the rules are enforced. Like, I have no idea. I'm not part of the movie industry or anything like that, but they need to start enforcing the regulations and laws and all that kind of thing to make sure that this isn't going to happen again.
Yeah, and look, for all we know, it's changed in a very positive direction because all the allegations on this show are centered, like 20 years in the past. So it could have changed. Having actors and writers and SAG-AFTRA go on strike last year means probably hasn't changed all that much. With all the things in the news going on about basically Hollywood was on stop for a year. So I'm like, it probably hasn't changed all that much realistically. If we were to look into it, we would find there's still a lot of these problems.
Yeah.
Like having like 10 writers in a writer's room and only one of them's getting paid. It's like, well,
that was another thing that came out on Quiet on Set about the women having to split a salary. It's just ridiculous. Like,
yeah. So has much changed? Look, probably not.
you hope.
Again, but there's a difference between adults dealing with those issues and children having to deal with those issues.
Yeah.
Just, like the whole crunch that they were under, and the fact that they're working basically like a job and a half each, and to try and split salary, in half between them, it's just so like cruel, because there were people getting paid reasonable money. If it was like there's no money to go around, it doesn't make it okay, but it at least makes it somewhat understandable. But when there were, at this time, millions of dollars being made on these shows, I'm sure Dan was compensated very handsomely for them. That you couldn't even pay, your staff correctly.
Well, was it the editor? One of the editors or the camera women who work like 19-hour days?
Yeah, and she was on multiple of his shows.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was like, finish one show, get on the other, let's go.
Yeah, I think it was the editor. Yeah.
Yeah, but like it's just crazy the workload. And so obviously, a lot of these kids burnt out and had issues with substance abuse, and I guess we'll say the kids that were on the shows the longest dealing with abuse like that. It's like you can't come out a well-rounded human being when you're like 9, 10, 11 years old and you're subjected to those conditions. It's impossible.
Yeah.
What was her name? Oh, the she was Amanda.
Amanda Bynes.
Amanda Bynes.
Amanda Bynes, yeah. Obviously, she has had a lot of trouble, transitioning from successful child star to an adult, as a lot of child stars do. And it's a phenomenon we see again and again and again with Amanda Bynes. And, like look at half the cast of the Goonies. Like they don't do too well when they kind of make that transition again, because kids shouldn't be in that position. It should be a play, like a child acting fine. It should feel like play, not like a 20-hour work day.
Yep.
Anyway, moving on. The other kind of half of this show, it centers on, I guess, the revelation that Drake Bell, one of the biggest child stars at the time, was abused by, I guess was he a production assistant?
Yeah, I think it was just
and somewhat like occasional actor for the shows.
Yeah. What was his name? It was.
There was Jason Michael Handy, but that was
something Peck, I believe it was.
Yeah, Brian Peck.
Brian Peck. Yep.
Brian Peck. Yeah.
So I think Jason Michael Handy, was another production assistant. I'm 90% sure he was actually one of the like chaperones that would actually take the kids from the parents to the actual, production area, and he was revealed to be a pedophile. Again,
this is another issue that kind of needs to be examined when you're working with kids, is the fact that, like it or not, child predators are going to go where the children are, and they're going to go where the children are accessible and vulnerable. And, obviously the big red, like, kind of mark over here is, well, TV. The kids are desperate. The power structure is completely imbalanced. Oftentimes the authority figure does not care.
Yeah.
And so they're easy targets. And kind of, that's another thing that the show kind of points out is that at least one of these kids was abused. Oh no, there we go. And Brian Peck was production assistant, somewhat actor. He played like the Pickle Man or something like that on these shows,
Amazing
which
book
is creepy. Which is creepy in and of itself. Like they have the whole glory hole innuendos with the pickle goes in the glory hole. I'm like, no,
Yeah, look,
that shouldn't be for kids. Like,
I
what are you
can't
doing?
understand. Like, how does that even make it? Like, how do people put that in and go, do you know what? This is brilliant for a kids' show.
I know.
How do they go and they look
It's
at it and
so
go,
weird.
wow, we are absolutely brilliant. How did we come up with this? It's so
The
clever.
only justification I think there could be, and this is again, I don't think it's a guaranteed justification, but Nickelodeon originally did mainly animated stuff, right?
Yeah, I think so.
At least that's how I believe their stuff was originally.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
a lot of like kids cartoons usually have adult jokes that are usually meant to go over the kids' heads, and like if a parent's watching, you see and you have a laugh. Like in Rocco's Modern Life, it's one of my favorites. Rocco actually works for a phone sex hotline.
Yeah.
And like as a kid, you don't realize that, but you know
Yeah.
he's like on the phone, and it's essentially his neighbor's wife, Mrs. Big Head, as he likes to call her, and he's like, "Oh baby, oh baby, oh baby," but he says it in such a like monotone, because he even doesn't realize that he's working that kind of a line. At
Yeah.
least I don't think he
yeah.
does. But it's one of those jokes that
I,
you see in an adult, and you're like, "What the hell?" And then you have a bit of a chuckle, and the kids don't get it, and it's fine.
but doing it live action, it's a lot weirder, a
Yeah,
lot stranger.
because
It feels a lot worse.
in the cartoon, everyone that's acting it is usually an adult, even if they're playing the voice
Yeah.
actor for a kid. A lot of times it's an adult. So anyone involved is an adult, and the joke again, there's no direct, I guess, negative thing happening to the kid, to a real
Yeah.
kid. Whereas a live action, you had, I think the critical scene was Ariana Grande. She ends up rubbing a potato all over her face.
Oh man, that's not the first time I've shown those videos. Silent producer Christian has shown us those videos on
And
occasion,
it's
and
just
like,
you got to ask the
it's
question
like
of like who.
some of these videos have been known for ages to be creepy and
Yeah,
inappropriate before this documentary.
yeah.
Like the first time I saw those videos was in the car with Christian, and he showed me these videos. I'm like, that is so weird. This Ariana Grande, the mega pop star.
Yeah,
I'm like, what is going on?
like
I don't know. I can't. I don't have a like really. I don't have a movie head, a TV show kind of head and all that kind of thing. But I kind of I
look,
wouldn't.
you've been in the entertainment business, Julian, as a professional wrestler.
Nah, no,
Look,
like,
it's different, but there is aspects to it that always relate.
no. I agree with that. However, I wasn't involved in writing storylines and all that kind of thing, right? And also that's a whole another kettle of fish. Man, do they have problems? However, I can't understand sitting down in a room with six other people. You would think at least one of those six people would be a mature adult, right? That if something like that popped up, you would say, no, you're wrong. And I understand you wouldn't want to tell your boss that they're wrong. However, surely at some point you stand up and say, no, you're wrong. And if you're going to go ahead with this, I'm going to take this further. And okay, I'm going to lose my job. And yes, this is my dream job. However, I need to stand up for what's right. Telling a 12, 13-year-old kid to rub a potato over their head or do slime shots or whatever it might be, surely at some point someone has to say, this is ridiculous. I can't believe we're doing this. It needs to stop. Now, again, maybe that's a very naive way and a very sheltered way of looking at things. However, I can't believe that it was allowed so many times.
Yeah, it always comes down to, I reckon there's probably a chance, I'm giving people the benefit of the doubt here, that somebody who has suggested that maybe it's been Dan, maybe it's been somebody else who's higher up, and there's been several people that are like, that's a bit sexual, isn't it? But they've shied away from saying anything about it
I
because
think
it's as you said, you're risking your entire job and your reputation in a field that you've dedicated yourself to kind of get into.
but Dan Schneider also gaslit people.
Yeah.
He would people would raise these topics with them and say this is a bit inappropriate. Like the parents would say, "What's going on here? I don't like this joke," and he would turn them into the background, being like, "What are you putting these thoughts in my head for? It's not meant to be sexual. It's just a joke. It's the kids are laughing." Kind of like there was that whole kind of pushback with some of the parents, and then they would get turned around and say, "But no, you're putting those thoughts in the your head. Like that's not what the intended joke is." So I'm like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of games that went on.
No, of course it didn't. Clearly based if everything that happened on set is true, like clearly there's a lot to be said for him. Like clearly he's not a great human being.
Yeah.
But you would think at some point there's somebody in power that would be like, "What is going on here? This needs to be looked at." Sure, we're going to lose a whole bunch of money, but come on, like, what's more important? And obviously, it doesn't work that
It's
way.
the money that's important,
Money's
surely.
money.
Like
It
I
doesn't
just
work,
think,
but
and that's why a lot of times it was allowed to keep going the way it did because,
Well,
got to make that cash, you know.
I mean, it gets worse though, right? So Brian Peck, he was one of these producers and as production assistants, actors on some of these shows. And he would have people over for barbecues, and I think the John Wayne Gacy worship this man had was probably weird enough by itself.
Yep.
This guy had like framed paintings by John Wayne Gacy, the serial killer.
Letters written.
Letters written by the serial killer who hunted boys and gay men and killed them in his garage and buried them under his house. I'm like, you like this individual and you were a fan, you're a John Wayne Gacy stan. I'm like, that's already weird enough. If I was a parent, I'd be like, mate, we're leaving, let's go.
Mm.
I'm like, we're not seeing this man ever again. And everyone thought this guy was cool.
Yeah.
And obviously he alienated Drake Bell's dad, and pushed him away. And then his mum was too busy working and living her own life, so he was like, "Oh, fine, I'll take care of Drake." And then the nightmare begins for Drake,
See,
right?
and
Because
that's
his mum obviously, saying she didn't care is possibly the wrong terminology, but obviously mistakes happened. I'm not going to put myself in her shoes.
Yeah, but I
It's not what
definitely
I would have done.
think, and I think it's fair to state that this was a failure by her as a parent,
Mhm.
Yeah,
because if it was nobody knew anything about it, and it kind of happened is one thing, but I understand that her and Drake's dad obviously had a strained relationship considering they were separated.
Yeah.
But if he has said to you, don't let him near this man, and there's got to be some thought in your head. It's like, obviously this has got nothing to do with you. It's got everything to do with your son. You don't think for a second that he probably cares about the son and is saying it for a good reason. Like,
yeah.
obviously we don't know the truth of whether he said that or not, but it's that is definitely, I would say, a failure as a parent.
We can infer from what happened with Drake's dad got pushed away by Drake's mum and Brian Peck because Drake's dad didn't want him around Brian Peck. So we can assume obviously that things would have been said and done to make this happen anyway. Obviously Drake's dad didn't trust Brian Peck. But that all happened, and then I guess we don't need to go into exactly what happened, but the abuse started.
Mhm.
And it didn't stop until how long did it go on? Quite a long time. But he only got 16 months in prison.
Which blows my mind. I don't understand. Like,
Again, but this apparently he had a lot of positive character references.
I don't care.
Everyone showed up to defend him in
You
court.
can sit there and tell me this man has cut off his foot and given it to an orphan in Africa, and he should still be. I don't care what positives you've done. You've done this negative thing. Like, you need to be punished for it. You need to be punished.
Not just one negative thing. Like he made Drake's life a living nightmare for it was quite a long time, I believe. But I don't have the amount of time it was on hand at the moment. But Drake living at this man's house, essentially suffering abuse day in day out, until he couldn't take it anymore.
Well, I think so Drake, obviously the dad told the mum, "Hey, just watch out, don't let him near this guy." The mum said, "Yeah, whatever." She clearly brushed it off, or at least that's what it seemed like. But it took Drake's girlfriend's mum to pick it up in such an extremely small period of time,
like 30 seconds.
Like, there's something wrong. So how do you care for a child day in day out and still not pick it up? Meanwhile, his girlfriend's mother picks it up straight away. Like, just I don't understand.
She has no. His girlfriend at the time's mum had no.
Vested interest in him.
Yeah, there's no vested interest for her in keeping the money train flowing.
Yeah.
There would have been. I think there probably would have been other people aware that something was terribly wrong, but you don't want to rock the boat. Like, it's that kind of Hollywood narcissism. I've got to worry about my own interests. And while the gravy train's rolling, no one's going to stop it. Obviously, the mum not being a part of that industry and not having those kinds of, I guess, ideas in her head, took one look at Drake and be like, "Nah, mate, something's going on." And it goes back to as well, Brian Peck in court, and he has all these positive character references, and everyone's like, "Oh no, how could you do this? I can't believe it." And it's like, and he only gets 16 months in prison, and then he gets hired back.
But was it Disney or was that the other
Yeah,
guy?
Disney.
How
It
does
wasn't Nickelodeon, but they would have known. They
that's
would
what
have
I
had
said.
to.
Let's be honest. Disney, Nickelodeon, exact same business, right? It's like Pepsi and Cola, right? I'm
Yeah,
sure Pepsi and Cola know exactly what's happening in the other person's business, right?
of course they do.
Maybe not publicly, but they know what's happening.
Yeah, of
Like, how
course.
do you magically hire the same person that just got put in prison because of what he was doing?
Yeah, and
Well, part of it was like they overlooked the crimes because of the character letters. Like
yeah,
people like James Marsden, Kimmy Robertson, and director like Rich Corral and stuff, and producers Tom DeSanto. Like they wrote a letters of support. How many of them knew the full extent? I don't know, because some of them
that's
have claimed that we didn't know exactly what went down, and that's why we supported a friend.
that's
But
what the other part of it is. It's like, well, if I'm the defense and I'm going for character reference letters, am I going to tell the people I'm trying to get character references for exactly what they're accused of? Probably not. So, look, again, you know what? We don't know the full extent of what these people knew when they wrote the letters. I can imagine there was a fair bit of denial or kind of unintentionally, not what's the lying by omission, right?
Yeah.
It's definitely kind of like they might not have known.
Wait,
Or
the
they
references?
the references, maybe not
that's
people
the
that
question.
were.
Because is it like, hey, Julian, I need a job reference. Can you
Yeah,
help a brother out?
it
But
was.
it's
I've been. Yeah, my client
I've
has been accused of some things he totally did not do. Can you just write a letter saying what a good guy I am?
yeah.
And a lot of people might have been like, yeah, sure, he's a good guy. These are things that he's done positively in my life. I'm not necessarily sure that when he went to court, everyone who wrote a letter would have been told the allegations.
Yeah, but
Well,
I feel again it's a
would you not, if you're writing the character reference, right? Would you not at least try and work out what's happening? Like, sure, I'm sure it's accessible what they're being charged for, right? But would you
No,
not?
well,
in some of these crimes it's not.
no, because
Um,
it's there's like laws regarding kind of identities when it comes to like child crime and stuff
yeah,
like that. It's like it's a bit more sensitive.
Hush, hush.
Mm.
but like I think if again I asked Julian for a character reference for a job, I'm sure Julian would ask a general question of like, oh, what kind of job is it, that kind of thing. And if
Yeah.
I said, oh yeah, it's for a pilot's job, I think Julian would be like, Alan, we don't have a pilot's license. I'll be like, don't
And
worry
Alan,
about
what's
it.
about that you know of?
I'll be like, don't worry about it. I'm gonna wing it. It's fine. Just
Hmm.
Wing it.
yeah, pun intended.
Nah,
And then just write the reference that you were, my co-pilot or
yeah.
first officer or something like that. It's obviously, Julian is a good person. Would probably be like, I don't feel comfortable doing that. That if I am partly responsible for you getting your hands on an airplane full of people without the correct qualification, that's probably not the right thing to do.
Yeah.
At the same time, if somebody said, "Hey, I need a character reference," it's about a criminal case. I would want to at least ask a few questions. I'm like, I need to know what exactly a criminal case is personally, because it's a good friend of mine. I'm still willing to help them out, but I still kind of want to know if it's like what exactly they're being accused of. It's like, did they kill a person? I'm like, well, I know Julian. He'd only kill a person to save somebody else's life or
Well,
something.
but like I think even like if you might change the wording of what you say and how you say it as well in the letter. So instead of saying, "Oh, Bob's the most fantastic person in the world," I might change it to, "My experiences with Bob have shown that he's a great
Mm.
person in the world," or whatever it is, right? Like the way you write it would definitely change based
Yeah.
on what it's about or what they're accused of or whatever it might be.
But at the same time, I think if you, again, a lot of these people have claimed they got duped. If that is the case, you have to be, I would say, very, very vocal about that, and then very, very vocal about your apology and offer it unreservedly to the
Mm.
Yeah.
person.
I agree with that. I think that's the other part of this. Everyone's super silent about all these allegations. The people that wrote the letters have come out saying, "Oh no, I didn't know about that," but they're not going to comment any further. Like, well, you
See,
should.
but then it goes back to, "Oh, well, I'm an actor and I don't want to ruin my reputation and I don't want to lose work for it."
Yeah,
So
but
back
you're
to my pockets.
but you're a famous actor, man. You don't need Nickelodeon no more.
Yeah,
No, but these are all these actors. Some of them aren't Nickelodeon actors. Did you say James Maston or whatever his name
James
is
Marsden, yeah.
from that '70s show? Correct. Obviously now he's got his own issues as well. But at the time, nobody
No,
knew.
not
No.
Danny Masterson.
James Marsden, he's
speaking Speaking of sex pests,
Well, whatever it is, right? No, but
this character reference strike.
no, well, okay, but then you go back to was it Mila Kunis and Ashton Kutcher writing a reference for him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are they going to do? Come out after the fact once he's been convicted and say, "Oh, I knew about it all the time," blah blah blah. No,
Yeah.
now they're going to ruin their reputation, and now they're never going to get cast again. Well, now they're going to back their, I'm not going to say their lies, but back their opinions of him, and say, "Well, everything I knew about him was that he was a good person."
I feel in their case, the information had already kind of come out, and then after that, they wrote the letters. So, like his case was a lot more public.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think, like in their case, they knew what the accusations were and everything else, and still decided to, I guess, support him. Which, it's a personal decision of if you're going to support your friend, in whatever situation. Because again, a lot of their context is probably coming from Danny Masterson's side, where he's like, "Nah, man, it wasn't like that. They're just trying to get me or whatever." So,
Yeah,
I
but
guess,
it's like Diddy coming out being like, "Oh, I didn't do nothing." It's like, nah, mate, sorry. It's like, read the room, please.
yeah, it's just,
Danny Masterson had these kind of allegations following him for a long while before it kind of came public. Scientology doesn't help. That also has kind of a bad stink around it. But going back to Quiet on Set, the problem is there was the other. It wasn't just Brian Peck. It was, what was the other gentleman's name?
Was it
Element.
the showrunner?
that was
He was the No, it
the-
was the guy who led the kids around.
yeah, that was Jason Michael Handy, which
Yeah,
I don't want to joke about it, but that is a terrible name to have in that context.
yeah. He also turned out to be a pedophile that would chat the kids up on computers and I guess keep mementos and that wasn't elaborated on as much as the Brian Peck allegations, but it's just as, I guess, serious because he kept mementos. Like there's evidence that he did things which they don't go into. They talk to one victim who possibly it's unclear the extent of abuse that she possibly occurred. But that was caught, I guess, in time for her to have a normal life afterwards. She didn't want to be involved with the show, so her mum was kind of talking on her behalf. And then he got rehired. So it's definitely kind of one of those things where it's like, I guess the heads up, they knew they didn't care as much.
It really doesn't make any sense because, again, these are different countries, obviously, but in Australia, if you're in any, I guess, job that requires you to, be involved with children, there's a working with children's check.
Mm-hmm.
Or in the ACT, it's a working with vulnerable people check, that kind of stuff. And for that check to be passed, obviously, your criminal history is kind of assessed.
Yeah.
And so if anyone's got any kind of situation where they've been to jail, that's already trouble. But, been to prison over children-related crimes, it's just doesn't make any sense that you're like, yeah, I'd hire this person.
No, I don't understand it at all. Blows my mind.
Yeah.
And I don't in an industry where like everybody knows everybody, right? Well, if you don't know them, somebody else is going to know them that you know. How these people can scoop by and then the excuse is, well, we didn't know. Well, like, come on, I'm sure somebody that knew and they told you about it.
100%.
Yeah, like
It's a small world.
The excuse of I don't know shouldn't fly, and I think it's a very easy way of passing off responsibility. But that shouldn't pass off responsibility because you should know. You're the one that's doing the hiring. You better find out.
Yeah. Look, and again, this is all part of a larger kind of, we're in a hashtag Me Too era. Like it's not okay. People are vocal about it now, where maybe they weren't in the past, which is a good thing.
Oh,
we can talk about it more publicly without, I guess, people feeling shame. Or
well, I think in the wrestling business a few years ago, like the Me Too movement was huge, and it got rid of so many shitty people from the business. And I'm sure that's only the tip of the iceberg that we've got. I'm going to say we.
Well, I would say the tip. I would say the tip is Vince, mate. He's gone.
Well, like there's like I'm sure it's like no, I'm not even sure. It's like it's still there.
Of course.
There are pieces of shit in the industry.
It's the same, but it's the same thing. It's the same Hollywood thing. You've got people in positions of power and people who, it's like the power imbalance is wrong because it's like without these people supporting you, you don't have a career. You know, like if you piss off Vince McMahon by rejecting his advances or making fun of him, or I guess detailing abuse that you've suffered from Vince McMahon, just for as an example,
Yeah,
alleged abuse. It's like, well, then you're not going to do well in your career. He might not fire you, but you
mhm,
won't get any opportunities.
yeah. I don't
So
know. I
it's like
think
it's the same. There's definitely it's analogous to Hollywood as well.
and it's hard. And, like it's so easy to sit here and say, well, in an ideal world, everybody's answerable to somebody. No matter who you are, you're always going to be answerable. And you can always go somewhere. And I go, I don't know how realistic that is. I wish it was true, because I'm sure that would at least help cut out a lot of this crap that's happening. But I think something needs to happen, and business structures need to change, or I don't know. Like I can't tell you, but
Yeah,
something needs to be done in
yeah,
so many industries.
definitely. I do think it's a conversation that people need to be having. This is this is a documentary show that people need to be watching. Yeah, yes, it's uncomfortable, but it also it does open the doors, I guess, to that larger conversation on how do you fix kind of Hollywood, and especially when it relates to kids, and just vulnerable people in general.
Yeah,
Because as you're right, Julian, something needs to change. But like, how do you fix it? I don't know. We don't know.
I don't know.
And I think it's if anyone has children who are aspiring to be in the acting profession, definitely needs to watch this
Mm-hmm.
and see kind of. I can guarantee that this is probably it's not just a unique story. It's a very common story about what these people have experienced as child actors, and see kind of the negatives and how it can weigh on a person in their developing years and kind of affect them for the rest of their life. Because so many people who were child actors, you look at them now, they're not doing too well.
Mm-hmm.
Like some of them have transitioned successfully into adult actors and kind of continued careers, but even as adult actors, not a lot of them, a lot of them aren't definitely happy.
Mm.
Um, and some who I guess just didn't really progress from that child actor phase, they're not doing too well.
Well, see, I think, yeah, again, like it's probably a bigger picture again, but I think if you grow up in the industry, right, and you're basically told your entire life, oh, acting and being successful is going to make you happy in life. Well, that's not true, right? Um, there's so much. If your world revolves around that, that's what you're going to think. But you don't get there. Sure, you might get career satisfaction, but that's not going to fulfill your life necessarily, right? There's so much more that you're going to be missing out on that's going to fulfill your life, and all the ethics and um, all that kind of stuff you're not going to get because you're based around that. And I would think, or at least I would hope, most human beings aren't fulfilled by just their career and being happy in their career. Like they need more than just that.
Going into a slightly hippie area at the moment, right? Kids are sponges. Sponges for positive and negative energy, and they pick up on a lot better than adults do. Um, you're in an industry that's very toxic.
Mm-hmm.
That alone is not good for the children, right? Like just being exposed to that environment of money is God, entertainment, kind of 19 nowadays, just the ethic, really kind of, it's not a good place for kids
That's
ethically.
not. Mm-mm.
And just like just the negative atmosphere that it's just Hollywood in general, right? Because everyone, it's vain. Everyone has egos. It's kind of not an environment just in general where children should grow up in or be
Well,
surrounded by.
what does it teach kids? Oh, well, you've now turned 12. You're not cute anymore. All right, you're gone. Like, what's
Yeah,
it going to
exactly.
teach a child? Like, that's
Yeah,
not how,
exactly.
that's not how the world should work.
Yeah, like they talk about that in Quiet on Set too, where the kids age out of the programs. You're too old for the kids network show anymore. Thanks for your time. See you later.
Hmm.
And then it's like, well, what do
Yeah,
they do now?
and then you tell a
Nothing.
kid that basically really grew up and formed their opinions and ethics in their life. That see you later now. Good luck with whatever you want to do. Go back to your normal life now. Like that's not
Yeah,
that's not how it works.
exactly. That
Well,
would destroy
yeah.
a child. That's all they've ever known. And it's definitely not what the real world is like. Um, yeah, I think this is the show that people need to be watching.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any other thoughts? I think we've covered pretty much everything.
One thought that I have, and this isn't about the content in the show. This is and I think a lot of series do this. Whatever it might be, whether it's always reality TV. That they did, I think it was the first 4 or 5 episodes or whatever it was. It was the content
Then they did
the catch-up episode.
But then they did the
recap.
catch-up episode, and it drove me nuts. I
Yeah,
hated
we
the
didn't
catch-up episode.
we didn't need it. Yeah,
I think it
Let's-
very much it was because it came out nearly a month after the show aired.
Mm.
It was a holy crap. This thing is going gangbusters.
capitalize on it.
Let's capitalize and let's make a little extra episode and let's pat ourselves on the back. Because that's what a lot of it seemed like.
Actually, yeah, one thing that we didn't bring up that I did think about is a lot of people are suggesting, and they asked it in the show a few times, they were trying to, I guess, fish for people to say that Dan Schneider did anything physically inappropriate with them. I don't get the vibes that he is that kind of person. Like, I think because everyone they all talked to said no, he never did anything physically inappropriate. And Dan Schneider's come out and said that stop trying to make me look like a pedophile.
Yeah.
I do agree with that. Like, I think the showrunners were definitely trying to push that kind of pedophile angle on Dan Schneider. I don't think
that is a vibe I got as well. Even before watching the show, my kind of implication was, oh shit, this is about Dan Schneider being a pedophile.
Yeah,
but obviously,
I think he's a bully, and I think a lot of his conduct was inappropriate. I don't think he did anything physically inappropriate with kids.
He definitely made an uncomfortable environment.
Yeah, but I think there is a line that they were trying to cross, but I don't think they managed to cross it because everyone they interviewed said, no, he didn't touch me.
Yeah.
That's one kind of thing I didn't like about the show. Like, they were definitely trying to push a specific angle they wanted to see.
Like, if there's actual physical proof or even verbal proof of this, I'm like, yeah, throw down the accusation. That's fair. But I think it seemed to me was like one of the big things was he was always getting those massages from, like, again, other female co-workers, which if you want to hire a masseuse and always get a massage at work, it's weird but okay. But if you're having like people that are being paid for a completely separate job,
no, I'm not saying he didn't do anything physically inappropriate, just not to kids.
Not to kids, yeah. I think the biggest thing they had was like his relationship with Amanda Bynes.
Yeah,
was definitely like I'd say inappropriate and closer, or like not, again, given their age difference, and she was a child actor, he was a producer, probably definitely something uncomfortable there. Can you use that to infer, like, again, something like abusive and pedophilic? I don't think so.
Yeah,
but it's definitely
that and the catch-up episode are my two kind of negatives of the show. I think they were trying to push an angle. It didn't all pay off, and the catch-up episode was a bit kind of, we didn't need that.
Yeah.
The only positive, I guess, of the catch-up episode was that, I guess, Brian Hearn and his mother were able to, because I didn't, when they recorded the original episodes, they didn't see each other. They weren't at the set at the same times. It was completely.
Yeah, I didn't realize that until the final episode.
Yeah, so I thought as well. Like, I'm like, okay, and then they finally revealed that they actually watched the show separately and realized they're both sides, which kind of makes you sad as well that they've ended up having a troubled relationship for the last
20
years over something that realistically wasn't their fault on both ends. Kind of does make you a bit sad, but also it is a positive that they were able to like, I guess, reconnect. Yeah,
I think it's and it's very, again, it's entertainment. It's easy to look at, okay, this has happened on TV, right? And it's so easy to, like, our lives haven't changed watching this, right? But if you look at these people as individuals and human beings, it's really unfortunate, and quite frankly, it's shit how these scumbags have literally torn families apart and ruined people's lives, especially at such a young age that they didn't have any choice in, or any ability to get out of and defend themselves. Like, people's lives have literally been ruined because of these people. So yeah.
I just what do we think is going to happen? Are we going to see a Quiet on Set 2? Are they going to be digging into more, or do you think it's a one and done? I think it's better if they just leave it alone.
Yeah, but again, just like we said before, money is always nice.
If it makes money, they'll probably do another one about another show or network.
We'll see the Weinstein spin-off.
Well, I think if they're somehow exposing these people and slowly getting rid of them, hopefully they get to them before earlier than 20 years later. But it's not a bad thing if they start getting rid of all these people from the industry.
Yeah, again, it's shining a light on very not always visible problems in a very kind of visible industry.
Yeah.
yeah, I think we covered everything. Thanks for joining us, Julian,
Thank you.
for
Thank you.
this special bonus episode of the Tuesday Review. We'll probably try and do a few more of these. You know, we can do them over the internet at home. It doesn't hurt us.
Yeah.
And
You know,
these
gets
ones are
Julian
YouTube
involved in
exclusive.
YouTube exclusive. Gets Julian involved in the show a little bit too, all the way. You know, he's 3 hours away from us here in Melbourne.
3 hours. Jeez, I wish. 4 hours, thanks.
4 hours. Okay, 4 hours.
Depends on how fast you drive, really. But
It's for Alan,
Yeah,
2.5 maybe.
it's like 5 hours, but anyway.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
You can catch the Tuesday Review on Apple
Spotify.
Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen. Please like and share the Tuesday Review Facebook page, Instagram page, Threads page, Newsmask page, Blue Sky page, and Twitter page.
Wow, you're
At
enormous.
Tuesday Review AU. Oh, I know, it's ridiculous, man. At Tuesday Review AU. Al nearly
Please.
blew the audio.
Hey, I'm muted. I'm muted. Please, like this video, share if you can, and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate it. We're trying to grow on YouTube.
Yes. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll be back next week. Adios, cousins.